frankly, from our perspective, on a much more uplifting theme, was the place of Israel in the world. Because for us at the American Jewish Committee, we stand for an internationally engaged America. We stand for an America committed to its allies, committed to its treaty obligations, who believe that development assistance is not just a giveaway, it is in the enlightened self-interest of the United States every bit as much as the Truman Doctrine, which provided aid, every bit as much as the Marshall Plan was in the enlightened self-interest of the United States in the post-war years. And we believe as well in helping Israel achieve its rightful place in the community of nations. Now, much is often made when it comes to Israel of lopsided votes at the United Nations and its specialized agencies as a way of trying to point to the fact that Israel is isolated. After those 74 meetings, and also based on year-round diplomacy, in which we are engaged with 115 countries a year, including, I would add, the Irish mission to the UN in New York, our Greek friends, and many others. What we have found this year in particular is that Israel has never been less isolated. The reason, not because the votes at the United Nations are suddenly changing en masse. They're not. Very slowly you see a change here and there. Not because the world has suddenly embraced fully the leadership of Prime Minister Netanyahu and his government. Not because suddenly the world has changed its mind on the controversial question of settlements. Those are not the explanations from our experience. The explanation lies somewhere else. It lies in what I believe has become, and rightfully so, the compartmentalization of foreign policy when it comes to Israel. Meaning, we can agree to disagree on A, B, and C. And we do, and we will hear each other, but we may not convince each other. Fine. But if that was once the beginning and the end of the discussion for many countries, today that's only a part of the discussion. The other and bigger part of the discussion for many countries is Israel has what we need. And how can we get what we need from this powerhouse country, but a country of only 8 million people? What do I mean by that? Well, one Bulgarian leader, one senior leader whose name is known to everyone in this room, said to us recently, "I refuse to go back to Israel." I heard this, and at first I wasn't sure what to do with this. And then I said, "But sir, can you explain why?" He said, "It's too painful. I see a country with 8 million people, more or less the size of Bulgaria, that has mobilized its human resources, created an OECD powerhouse, one of the most innovative nations on the planet, with a rising per capita GDP that puts it in the company of Japan, and some say will soon exceed Japan. I see that Israel has more startups on the NASDAQ stock market than any country in the world besides the US and China. I see Israel's advances in water management, in cybersecurity. We need Israel on intelligence gathering, intelligence sharing, on national resilience models. We need procurement of military weapons that have been tested time and again in the field. A long list. And perhaps the greatest example of this change I'm talking about, and there are many, is India. If one looks at India-Israel relations until 1992, they were, shall we say, frigid. Israel was, for India, largely a hostile nation because of India's embrace of the non-aligned movement, sometimes called the Group of 77, but actually larger. Beginning in 1992 and over the last 25 years, Indian-Israeli relations have changed 180 degrees. I can say they have revolutionized. Why? Because in the enlightened self-interest of both nations, they found policy commonalities, commercial commonalities, strategic commonalities, and the relationship has become ever closer, to the point where there was this image in July of this year of Prime Minister Modi of India on his first visit as Prime Minister to Israel, walking on the beach with Prime Minister Netanyahu, and Israelis saying they looked like a couple in love, the two of them walking on the beach. I can talk as another example, if you allow me, Ambassador, of the change in the relationship with Greece. We began thinking about what seemed to us to be a very logical strategic triangle among Greece, Cyprus, and Israel in the 1980s, together with our Hellenic American friends. But at the time, Greece was the last West European nation to extend full de jure diplomatic relations to Israel. That did not happen until Prime Minister Mitsotakis made the decision in 1990. The first 42 years of Israel's life, the European country on the mainland closest to Israel had the most distant relationship. Cyprus was another member of the non-aligned movement, the Group of 77, and under Makarios was one of the leaders. So their relationship with Israel was no better than the relationship with Greece, and Cyprus was even closer. Today, Ambassador, if you will agree with me, if not, I hope you'll say so in the discussion period, there is truly a strategic triangle that has been built in every imaginable sphere, with more to come. And again, in the enlightened self-interest, when we go to Nicosia or Athens, or when we meet with their leaders in New York, my guess is that their views do not differ in any material way from other EU member states on the peace process questions. But that's there. And here, what can we do for each other? How can we reinforce this strategic triangle of democracy and stability and security in a tumultuous region which we call the Eastern Mediterranean, where until a few years ago, Egypt was in turmoil, Syria remains in turmoil, Turkey is an uneven and increasingly unpredictable actor on the regional and global stage, as we've all seen. And here you have this triangle. Some in this country would like to extend it to a quadrilateral, a strategic quadrilateral to include Bulgaria. Let's see. But my point here for this purpose is simply to say this is a change for the positive. Now finally, let me come back to the Trump administration and not offer you what others are saying, but what we see. And we have been asked by many countries in these meetings, what do we do? It's not our job to advise other countries. And by the way, that's against American law. There's a Foreign Agents Registration Act which specifically prohibits it unless one is registered as a foreign agent of Belgium, Botswana, Bulgaria, or what have you. But what's clear is that what's new in this administration is what President Trump repeated as a campaign theme, America first. It's this view, which you can agree or disagree with, that America has been this international actor who has given a lot more than it has received, who has often been taken advantage of by other nations, other regional blocs, who, in this spirit of goodness and kindness and benevolence, gets taken advantage of in just about every bilateral negotiation, including in particular trade deals, the Korea-US Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, from which the president unilaterally withdrew. Go down the list. And that this president is not part of the establishment. The State Department, he believes, is. He is not. He is not part of the system that led to these weak deals, to this weak posturing on the global stage. He is here to put America first. If it serves American interests, we go forward. If it does not serve American interests as he defines those interests, not as I or you, then he's ready to disrupt. And anyone who follows Donald Trump must know the English word disrupt and the noun form disruption, because that's what this is all about. He is out to disrupt. It's no longer about the niceties of diplomacies and the striped suits of the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. It's about brutal, brute, ruthless, unapologetic American assertion of power and interest, which, he would add, I believe, ultimately serves the world that he wishes to help fashion, but is driven by an American first notion. So take the Iran deal, which is, I guess, the topic du jour for many. It's still fresh. It was only Friday. For those of us who've been thinking about the Iran deal, it feels like a month already since Friday. But it's only Friday that he made that speech. And what do we see, first of all? We see that, for the moment, the United States stands alone. Even more so, the United States stands divided within itself. That's abundantly clear. Why did Donald Trump take this step on Iran? And by the way, just to be precise, he did not tear up the deal. He did not tear up the deal. It's important to emphasize this. But he did decertify Iran. Why? Because he believes in his gut that the Obama administration wanted a deal at any and all costs and negotiated one of the worst deals in American diplomatic history. I don't think for him that's a slogan. I think he believes it from head to toe. He believes it was a bad deal. And rather than continue with the bad deal, which is defended by the very people who negotiated the deal, so why should he listen to them? Why should he listen to Angela Merkel and the German leadership tell him to stay in the deal when they were the ones who participated in the negotiation of the deal in the first place? Or Federica Mogherini on behalf of the European Union, another participant in the deal. So from his point of view, their views, I think, are largely irrelevant. By the way, truth in advertising, the American Jewish Committee took 23 days after the deal was announced on July 14th, 2015. Secretary of State John Kerry came to our building in New York. He had a broken leg at the time from his bicycling accident, but he still came with crutches and a big cast on his leg to try to convince us to support the deal. Wendy Sherman, the Undersecretary of State and Chief Negotiator, followed on a separate trip to try to persuade us. We met with others, including our European friends. In the end, we opposed the deal. For the record, we opposed the deal. But for the record, we did not call on President Trump to decertify. That's a whole separate discussion, which I'm happy to have if the audience wishes. But that's his view. And his view is that ultimately, the European Union will come around. They may not know it, they may not think it, but ultimately Europe will come around, because at the end of the day, if the choice becomes the Iranian economy or the American economy, but not both, then the choice becomes obvious. UNESCO. Donald Trump is not the first president to withdraw from UNESCO, for the record. Ronald Reagan was the first president in 1984 to withdraw from UNESCO, and by the way, at the time, so did the United Kingdom withdraw from UNESCO. Why did the United States withdraw now? This is simply my speculation. Because it wanted to exit before a new Director General was named to replace Bulgaria's Irina Bokova. Because this was the moment in the days just before where the United States could get out without having then